The Amazing World of Gumball is known for having a lot of different characters. Some have the spotlight for a long time, and others are only known for a very minor appearance. I'm going over one of the most requested topics on this channel. This is No Strings Attached, the story of Mr. Robinson. Also plug in my Twitter. Gaylord Robinson, trainee, homeowner, husband, father of one, the neighbor of the main family. He's one of the most frequently used major characters within the show. He sports a puppet-like appearance both inside and out. This aids in his design with his over-the-top outbursts and general walk cycle. In the episode The Boss, he actually loses stuffing, and it's revealed that he needs a specific type of stuffing in order to function. He fashions a blue blazer with a white shirt underneath, brown pants, slippers, and a black thick-rimmed glasses. He also wears a tie for purpose despite being retired, revealed in the tag.
I agree. Wearing a tie every day despite neither of us having a job is perfectly appropriate.
It gives you a sense of purpose when you have absolutely nothing to do.
The most distinct feature about Mr. Robinson is his detachable heart, which is seen in the depth and the heart. In the depth, when Gumball thinks that Mr. Robinson is choking, Gumball gives him the Heimlich maneuver and causes his heart to pop out. In the heart, we see that his heart functions as his center of emotions in an ironically rational way.
If you let you know what's in, sooner or later, you get your heart broken.
He married his wife, Margaret Robinson, before moving into the home that they had now. Apparently, somewhere within this, she got very sick, but ended up well, or as well as she could be. They'd have their only child, as far as we know, Rocky Robinson, who works as a janitor and kind of an everyman of Elmore Junior High. He's also been seen as the person who handles lunch and the bus driver. They bond over the pain and misery of others, according to the poltergeist, and enjoy arguments, which may be a euphemism considering how Mr. Robinson describes it.
Richard, calm down.
Calm down, Nicole.
Richard, please don't.
Margaret and I used to argue like that.
Talk to me like some kind of.
Sometimes up to 6 times a day. From first thing in the morning until last thing at night.
Apparently in that same episode, the poltergeist, they'd also end up losing that spark, which leads into Mr. Robinson going into a deep depression. I also assume it to be Gumball and Darwin's first exposure to someone with depression, given their character dynamic was more young and naive rather than their slightly more cynical and know-it-all nature of the later seasons. Gaylord and Margaret work because they both enjoy watching someone suffer, even if it is themselves. Such as in the beginning of the episode The Car, we see Margaret get hit with a bowling ball, knocking off her wig, thus leading into her husband laughing at it, acknowledging how funny the encounter is. However, with his son Rocky, their relationship is, well, rather distant. Unlike the dynamic between Gumball and to a lesser extent Darwin, considering that Rocky is Mr. Robinson's son, Rocky has a more legitimate reason to want to make his father proud. However, as we see in The Boss, he disapproves of Rocky, presumably because of his job or status, considering that he works as a janitor slash everyman in a high school and has no bigger vision than just that.
You could ask his son Rocky. He's a janitor at a school.
I want nothing for that loser. He's an embarrassment to the Robinson name. I'd rather get stuffing from a turkey.
It's actually in this episode where we see that Mr. Robinson is begrudgingly old-fashioned. To him, a higher status would be slaving away in the corporate world. Literally. As Gumball and Darwin explained that Rocky can't visit his own dad in the hospital because work is sucking the soul out of him, there's this warmness from his father. Just hearing that. In that sense, it'd be reasonable to assume that Rocky represents the late 80s or 90s kick who wanted to rebel against their old man, and thus explains why, even though he has a great affinity for his dad, he doesn't want to be him. Despite interacting very little within the show, Rocky has helped his dad beyond the stuffing transmission from The Boss. He's also bailed Mr. Robinson out of jail or prison multiple times, even when one of those crimes violated 14 international peace agreements.
And my little atomic energy kit. What kind of child wouldn't want to play with a little uranium?
Oh boy.
Please don't tell me I needed to specify children's toys.
This time I got arrested for violating 14 international peace agreements.
He has a pretty unspectacular life according to episodes such as The Depth, where it was a part of his song to describe how decent slash solid his life is, or The Tag, in which after confronting Richard on his attempted intrusion of trash cans, he'd show that he has enough time to park inside of a trash can for a long period of time. What little we see involving Mr. Robinson involves maintaining the house, like doing the yard work and the car, and the boss. He also has a big fascination with this car and the upkeep that comes with it. According to the wiki, it is a pearl white 1964 Lincoln Continental, and it appears in multiple episodes from the debt, the tag, and most notably, the car.
Oh, just... At least things can't get any worse.
There's a tiny part of him that wants to dance and sing, which he'd express via a song and dance in his debut episode, The Debt. His wife doesn't really care of or approve, but his son was very optimistic about it. His relationship with Gumball can be clear and unclear depending on how much you want to assume. In a lot of cases, because of Mr. Robinson's prone to outbursts, disdain of children in general, and overall grouchy attitude and perspective on life, Gumball, especially pre-season 4 Gumball, would clash a lot with Mr. Robinson, thus leading into a largely one-way fascination. This would be accentuated the most in the episode The Car, in which Gumball and Darwin show that they would do anything for Mr. Robinson, from sorting out leaves by color, painting the fence to his every whim, and also cleaning up the messes in supersonic speed to the point where even Mr. Robinson was afraid of their potential. Now you may ask, why do they go through so much work for this guy?
Listen, kids. Why are you trying so hard to help me?
Because we love you, Mr. Robinson.
In The Debt, Gumball would go through extraneous lengths in order to, quote, protect Gaylord, even though in nearly every instance, he wouldn't need protection. To Gumball, it was his way of paying back the universe for creating Mr. Robinson. In the tag, he'd betray his own father's agenda and help Mr. Robinson pull pranks on Richard, because they were both under house arrest for a legitimate fight. This isn't to say that they were on Mr. Robinson's side, but their willingness to ally someone outside of their family, especially with how young they were, shows the bond they personally have with Mr. Robinson. There's also the sale, in which Mr. Robinson is attempting to move away, and Gumball and Darwin legitimately scare the rest of the family when they state that this would be an improvement for the neighborhood.
Maybe we'll get some pleasant neighbors this time.
Take that back! No neighbor could ever replace the miracle that is Gaylord Robinson! Take it back!
Okay, I'll take it back.
This has led the duo into doing everything in their power to stop the sale, up to and including destroying a sewer pipe, unintentionally and erroneously thinking that it was oil, trying to decipher the potential buyer's motivation in wanting to live in a neighborhood that the entire episode spent portraying as unfit for anyone. Historically, Mr. Robinson has always been disproportionately mean towards Gumball and Darwin. The episode The Heart displays this very well. They show a montage of what I would assume to be the highlights, with Mr. Robinson never being nice to Gumball and Darwin. This leads into their bonds being broken when Gumball and Darwin overhear Mr. Robinson speaking very lowly of them. However, it is revealed towards the end that Mr. Robinson has a reason as to why it's hard for him not to be mean.
Okay, that's enough. I admit it. I felt something. But if you give me any more love, I'll start spewing confetti. Now, get out of my way.
This makes him a lot more justified, or at least as it seems, but not enough to excuse his actions. He seems to have a genuine fear of heartbreak, which can be caused by someone he cares about leaving. To our knowledge, the only other time this has happened outside of the shipping, where he was shipped with Banana Barbara, his only other experience with heartbreak was nearly losing Margaret, to which he handled horribly, living in the Watterson shed before being transferred over to the attic. Even towards the end of The Heart, he admits that he slightly hates their company less, which is probably the best that you'll get from someone who is so hardwired to be as hateful as Mr. Robinson. However, he would reflect on Gumball and Darwin's good deeds in The Car. His relationship with Richard is substantially less extensive, however significant. He clearly has a rivalry with Richard despite probably just being slightly more responsible for tasks at home, which is probably balanced by Richard's greater love and appreciation for his children, the way Mr. Robinson lacks that. Mr. Robinson has an extreme annoyance or bitter hatred of Richard, which is prominently shown in the tag.
And the police said I have to wear this thing for
6 weeks. And I can't leave the house or it
sets off an alarm and I'll be
sent to prison. And it was all his fault!
Despite fighting, getting arrested, still finding ways to prank each other, and still getting arrested in the end, I would play devil's advocate here and say that at least in this relationship, the bad aspects seem to be mutual, compared to Richard's relationship with Larry, in which it's clear that Richard is in the wrong much more times than Larry. Mr. Robinson also had his car broken by Richard in the car, which most likely didn't help. Mr. Robinson would also lash out at Richard for attacking him under the presumption of being a ghost in the Poltergeist. I want this last section to be more about the potential for his character, to improve or to add any depth. I'll do this for every analysis of any character that I talk about. My top 5 ways are pretty simple, and these aren't in any order. So firstly, if there were any new episodes, there should be episodes about Mr. Robinson and his son Rocky. I want to learn more about their dynamic and maybe even how Margaret feels being thrown into the mix. Secondly, I enjoy episodes in which Mr. Robinson is happy singing or dancing. I would love more episodes revolving around that. But I also think a good potential way to take his character to the next level is to build off of the last episode in which Mr. Robinson struggles to be happy and nice towards others. So basically going the opposite way of the second potential character point. I'd also love to know more about his early life and what job he probably had. He appears to be in his 50s according to the Poltergeist, and as such probably has some type of interesting experience in his teens or 20s, even his 30s. Maybe he was in the military. Maybe he was more of a wild person when he was young, like Rocky. Maybe he was incredibly nice, like Alan Nice, and something involving heartbreak led into basically what he is now. Lastly, I would love to have an animated scene that really accentuates the puppet aspect. Like just a section that has the Robinson family as actual puppets and really trying to nail that performance down. Mr. Robinson is a very interesting character that they have fleshed out enough to not entirely fit the grouchy neighbor mold, but he also has so much potential to be much more than I'm actually glad that he's used so much, and I would love more around him. His allure comes from his own self-reflection, and oftentimes he's been able to create great episodes through his deviation from his default personality. He's a pretty good character, and this is my first dive into characters specifically, so let me know how well I did in the comment section below. And as such, please let me know of any other Gumball characters you'd love to see in this sort of video format. But until then, special thanks to supporters of June. Follow me at the Alpha J Show on Twitter, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.